see what happens. I'm just looking at the YouTube chat. It says you can now pin a message to the top of your live chat for viewers to read.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it says that the stream is going to go live at 8:05 rather than now.
Well, it's on now, so.
Right, but when I go to the video, it's got a countdown going until 8:05. So it seems as if maybe the time was displaced to be 8:05. I don't know. That's just what I'm seeing on my screen here.
Okay, and are you able to simultaneously get YouTube up?
Now it appears to be live. We're good to go.
Yeah, so it's good. And
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. And it's 8 o'clock in the East. I wonder if you know where your children are. We are launching this summer. Nick Lawrence has volunteered to lead the parade while I recover from radiation therapy, and so I'm expecting to be fully recovered from September. But anyway, until Nick goes back to school, he's going to run the show here, and so I'm going to turn it over to Nick. And thank you, Nick, for doing this today.
Yeah, of course. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us again in this mini series that we're calling Tarot Permutations. It's an installation in Skip's larger series called Tarot as a Roadmap for Life. So over the coming weeks of the summer, we're going to be looking at the interactions between various cards in the major arcana, whether it be 2 cards, 3 cards, potentially maybe even 4 cards, and consider the major arcana as a whole, all the cards in relationship to one another, rather as isolated events. So in previous presentations, I've made the analogy of imagine that all the tarot cards are at a dinner party with one another, and say card A comes up to card B. Consider how they might get along. Would they enjoy conversation with one another, or would they want to terminate conversation as soon as it began? So with that in mind, this evening, Raquel Fonseqa is going to give a presentation about 2 or more cards of her choosing, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Nick. I'm just going to present 2 cards, actually.
Okay.
Especially from the Mythic Tarot.
Okay, so Raquel, can you increase the gain on your microphone? Because it's a little quiet.
Let me see. I think I'm gonna have to hold it like this. Is it better?
It's better if you hold it, yeah.
Yeah.
Another way to do it, if you have a Mac, is to increase it on the preferences and then sound.
Okay.
So you go up into the little Apple sign, system preferences.
What about now? Can you hear me better?
Much better, much better.
Okay. So okay. I don't have to hold it?
Nope.
Okay.
It's working perfectly now. Thank you for making the switch.
Oh, that's okay. I'm glad that I found it.
Yeah.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my presentation compared to Nick's and Jordan's is pretty simple and small. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about these 2 cards, the Magician and the Judgment, especially through the Mythic Tarot deck, because I think that Liz Green and Juliet Sherman Burke, who are the creators of that deck, made that correlation, putting the Hermes god in both of these cards, even though they're not usually correlated in other decks. So you guys can see just the first screen, or you can see both of them. I don't know how you guys are actually watching my screen.
Yeah, we can see what appears to be 3 separate slides. Are you able to do maybe if you hit view and then slideshow?
I don't know.
If not, that's fine, but it does appear that we're kind of seeing rather than slide by slide, all of them in succession.
What about now? Is it better?
Yeah, it took us to
The second one.
Slide. Yeah.
Okay. This is the first one. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
So,
Hi. So glad to be here. Hi.
Hi, Annabelle. So this is this presentation is about a comparison created by Liz Green and Juliet Sherman Burke in the Mythic Tarot deck. Using Greek mythology, Liz and Juliet created a series of correlations that was not usual in tarot. So correlating tarot cards to mythology, astrology, Kabbalah, etc. is not unusual in the process of studying, thinking, and understanding the cards, but some of the correlations created by these authors are quite unique. So this is why I wanted to talk about the Magician and the Judgment card, because it portrays the god Hermes in both of them, but in very different aspects of the archetype of this god, I think. God Hermes is guide of travelers, patron of thieves and liars, ruler of magic and divination, bringer of sudden good lucks and changes in fortune. He's a trickster because he's deceitful and ambiguous, yet he is the trusted messenger of the gods and the guide of souls into the underworld. In the Mythic Tarot, the Magician is considered the guide, not usually as the beginning in the other tarot decks. And the author says, this means that somewhere within us, no matter how lost or confused we might be at any point in life, there is something within which has foresight and resources which are often hidden from consciousness, but which can divine what direction to take and what choices to make. So he is known as a playful god. So Hermes does not come to us when he's called. He only attends to us when the other part of us believes it's important. So that is one aspect of why he's considered a trickster. He's not always within our reach in a conscious kind of way or in a conscious level, but he comes to us when he thinks it's important. So it's the Hermes archetype in this card is considered the unconscious for us. So it's kind of like the authors are telling us that the unconscious comes to us or brings us messages when we least expect them. So the unconscious power within which looks after us, although we cannot see him, and which appears as though by magic, is at the most critical and difficult moment in life to offer guidance and wisdom. This is an important aspect of the Magician card in the Mythic Tarot, because although this card represents the beginning, it is possible that is not a conscious one. So we are not, I forgot a word. So we are not completely on board with the agency of an action. So I put these cards, these other magician representations, because just to remember what he is like in the Rider-Waite and the Mercedes deck. So remembering the magician from the Rider-Waite and Mercedes, the conscious aspect can be interpreted by work. The beginning is symbolized by the capacity of one's work. So we can see, so it can be rational in a certain way. A rational mind can interpret one's work as something concrete that we can see and we can probably trust. This is the magician in the Thoth deck, which is kind of like a different one. I'm gonna zoom in the card so you guys can see a little bit better. So there's a snake here in the top of his head. There's all the minor arcana symbols, but there's also a golden egg with wings, which represent the quintessences of the tarot. So when we like talking about the fifth tarot, I think that this card already has a little bit of that idea inside of the magician card. So within this representation, we see various symbols, one of them being an egg, which represents the quintessences. It is also correlated to the astrological glyph of the planet Mercury. I think this is why it begins this correlation of the magician card with Hermes for the Mythic Tarot, because the Thoth deck was created by Aleister Crowley, and he was also in the Golden Dawn school, I think, or the Golden Dawn group. So everyone in that group correlates the magician card with Mercury. But I think Mercury as a planet, not the alchemical process or the alchemical element per se. So, so Hermes reappears in the Mythic Tarot close to the end of the journey in his psychopomp form, when he is the guider of souls. In this format, he is a powerful and underworld deity, emissary of Hades, who summons the dying gently by laying his golden staff upon their eyes. I have an image of him, I think in the last one. So we can see him here pretty differently from what we saw him as the magician, because first of all, he has his helmet, and that is an idea of the Greek mythology that everyone that wears a helmet in the underworld cannot be seen. So this is why he's also the messenger of the gods. He's the trusted emissary, because he can walk in the underworld without being caught by anyone. He's also taking in his hand the symbol that can also represent the medicine, the symbol of medicine. I'm going to go back a little bit. So he can guide the souls to the underworld, but he also can bring the dead back to life. The author says that on an inner level, Hermes the psychopomp is an image of a process which occurs at certain critical moments in life. A summing up when the experiences of the past are gathered together and seen as a part of an intelligent pattern, and the consequences of these experiences must be understood and accepted. So the judgment card is this process of summing up, but not in an intellectual function as well, in the same way as the magician card. That is the call to the dead to rise in this card. For the many and the very varied actions and decisions we perform to knit together and yield a harvest, symbolizes rewards for efforts made, and it reminds us that the judge is within us. The judgment card in the tarot deck is also an ambiguous one because it represents reaping everything that we sow. So if we were able to go after our intuition and actually made whatever it was that the magician card wants us to do at the beginning of the journey. So the judgment card will always bring something from the past, but in the form of a new beginning, everything will be understood. But if we did not understood the idea of the magician card in this deck, when the judgment card appears, it can be also a negative message, when you have to learn all over again what is really the meaning of that unconsciousness, and when you're being pulled to do something that you're not completely 100% rationally aware of. Is making any sense to you guys?
Yeah. Yes, very much.
Okay, so I brought these two images also from the Rider-Waite and the Marseille, because I think that in both of these cards, the calling is something that is a key factor. The rising from the dead, the starting over, but it's kind of like a new leaf. I think it's the new beginning aspect is more highlighted in these cards. It also represents a paradigm shift, the sudden manifestation of a new perspective, meaning, or quality of life, but it can also be seen as a wake-up call moment. So this is the judgment card in the Thoth deck, which is pretty different from everyone else, I think. In the Thoth tarot, it's called the Aeon, it has its own name. It signifies transmutation, starting over something, hope, finding oneself, and spiritual development. It also is related to the fire element, purifying and confident energy. So it is the beginning of a new era. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better this card, because it's like a little bit of a trip.
Yeah.
Because I think it's at least 3 different deities here. I think this is Horus. I think this is like an Indian goddess that I don't know who it is actually, but I think it's another one.
I think it's supposed to be Harpocrates. Where, I think in Crowley's system, he created like this almost like a holy trinity of his own kind of thought. And I think that he called this deity Ra-Har-Kuit or something. It's kind of just a play on Harpocrates, and he was the god of secret wisdom. That's why he's holding up the silence symbol.
Oh yeah.
And then there's
Go.
and then the other one is the blue one draped all over the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the other. I mean, it's definitely Horus that's seated on the throne, because, without going super far into what Crowley thought and what he put into all of his cards, he he understood himself to be the kind of agent of the new aeon of Horus. So it's definitely Horus, and he had another. Oh, right. He called the sky goddess Nuit, which is a play on Jeb and Nut from Egyptian mythology, and she was the goddess that reached over the earth and was the entire sky. Maybe you've seen like I think it's the Egyptian stele of it's like a cow reaching across the sky, and several of the people are getting the milk from the cow that's kind of the sky, and people might think it has something to do with the Milky Way. Anyways. Yeah.
So actually, this is unfortunately just some ideas that I have to share with you, because seeing these two cards together, the first one, the Hermes, is just in the middle of a crossroad pointing at two directions, actually, because he's going like this. And the road is all rocky and with a lot of cliffs and things to kind of like obstacles. So this is kind of like the most simple image of him, but it also represents an aspect of initiative of the person to go after this path or not. Whether in here he is in a more serious form, which is coming like with a certain message from everything that we've done in the other card, in the Magician card. I'm going to stop for a moment my sharing so we can discuss a little bit.
Oh, but can you leave the images up?
You want to,
Yeah,
which image?
those two
Gilda?
you just had.
These two? Okay.
Yeah, those are good enough for.
Yeah, and those are from the mythic deck that you're talking about. So
Yeah, the Mythic
that's
Tarot.
great.
Well, we also can observe that the Magician is a young boy and Judgment is a fully fledged grown man. And he, in the Magician, the symbol of the snakes, although it may be utilized as something for medicine, it is actually the symbol of the Kundalini. The two snakes are wrapped and then they open up to the fire in the middle, which is the fire above after it's been risen, and he's holding it. So he has mastership over it. He has skill. And the Magician is figuring out what to do. What I found really curious also is that I've noticed in some things I've read that, and the Judgment card, when the deck is read backwards, and then the card of the Rider deck, what is a young boy and a woman and a man, it's a birth card. So it's calling them to be birthed. So it can be read backwards too, whether there's an ending and a new birth, or is a new birth ready to begin without a tail coming before it. So that's something I want to share. And since Raquel brought up the background, rocky background in the Magician, and in the Judgment, he has a perfect set of stairs that he can go in and out. So he's got some kind of mastery into the underworld. And one more thing, because I play around with numbers, the Magician is 1 and Judgment is supposed to be 20. So that's 2 ones. And he's holding in his hand 2 snakes coiled and and he's in between the columns again of the high priestess. So he's kind of a master of duality.
Yes, yes.
Mhm. You know, he's got a hold on. He has some skills that he has cultivated.
I see wings on the feet of the judgment card, I think.
Yeah.
In the magician, his feet are kind of hidden. I don't think there are wings there, are there?
I think there are rings as well, but I think it's also a way to say that the choice of the path is ours and not from what he's pointing, I think.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Because the wings in his feet is an idea of being a messenger, of being the traveler.
Right. And it is the same costume, the red with the button in the corner and the white underneath, and that's kind of classical. Yeah. It's very Greek. They're both very Greek.
And notice that judgment has a gold. He has the gold helmet.
Mhm.
And the magician, the gold is still embedded in the coin.
Yeah.
And the chalice maybe, but definitely not over his head.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, this is probably taking us a little far afield, but you know, I often think about how strange it is that all of these relics of Greek mythology show up in the world around us. And I was riding down the road not too long ago, and I saw like a Goodyear tire sign.
Yes.
And realized that they have Hermes sandals.
Yes.
As their emblem.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was known as swift-footed Hermes. So
Yeah.
wings on the feet.
Usually post offices have like Hermes symbols as well.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, of course, ambulances and
right.
anything in the medical profession, it's either Asclepius or Hermes.
Mm-hmm.
It's also really interesting too that, you know, in both of these, they're piles of stone. And I know that Hermes was, you know, in some sense kind of associated with boundaries and maybe the transgression of boundaries or going beyond boundaries. And in fact, that's what a herm means, is a boundary. It can either mean a boundary as a pile of stones or herm columns like you see behind him in the older version. So I don't know quite what to make of that, but it is an interesting detail that they've, I would assume, very consciously included.
Well, I think that in the Greek mythology, being in a state that is with a lot of rocks and not actually nature, like nothing growing, nothing blooming, it's important because it means that the start of something is the hardest part, actually. And it's also in a place where nothing is growing, actually. So I think also the magician in this deck is a much more hard initiation, is not an easy, it's not just an easy, because I don't think that the other tarot decks have this idea of making things easy, but the hardship in this card is more obvious than in other decks.
Mm-hmm.
And in the judgment card, you can see that the nature is right there. It's really close. So in this moment, you are closer to something greater and something brighter, actually, because also in this image, if you see, look like right there, the sun is coming up, actually.
It's a harvest. It looks like there's
Yeah.
a harvest. And it reminds me of the Empress card.
Yeah, it
The
is.
Empress card has that same kind of background. I would also share that the figure of Hermes in Judgment is just as big and tall as each of the columns. That means, and each one column is dark and one is light, representing duality. And he is not above it or below it. He is on par with it. He has a certain mastership, and it's almost like he's the third element, a transcendent function of duality, the active one that connects it. And he's just as big as, so it doesn't overwhelm him or anything. He's got it under
Yeah.
under his skill and possibility. And he's also in this particular card, not so much in the Rider deck, he's waking up the dead. He's waking up mummies that have been dormant to the reality that he's offering, the life that he has already transcended, that has that power. Because look at it, his figure is exactly as big as those columns and even bigger. And he has steps to harvest, and he has access to the underworld. So he's the connecting figure that has skill.
It seems to me like I don't know if this is what you were driving at or if it's something that that's just coming up for me, but it seems like there's a lot to do with intuition, both in what you were saying about the summing up and obviously also kind of mercurial nature of Hermes. And it's really interesting, it seems like in the earlier version of the card, like it makes me think of maybe the story where, Hermes tricks Apollo and stills his cattle. But then in the later card, it makes me think of maybe Hermes as like he appears in the Odyssey, or as a true psychopath. And I think it's really interesting, the thought about intuition, because, if we talk about it just in the context of what Jung had to say about intuition, he grouped that into one of his irrational functions, which also gets at what you were saying, that it's not necessarily like an intellectual or a rational understanding, but it's rather the moment when a series of patterns collide to kind of maybe give you this sudden glimpse of insight. And that seems to kind of be wrapped up in these cards as well.
Yeah, the thing about the Mythic Tarot is that it's all related to intuition in, I think, most of the cards, especially in the major arcana, because it's really difficult for these authors to put in an interpretation that is not psychological and it's not nuanced. So it's also why I thought this combination was interesting in the first place, because it's also the beginning and the end of the journey without the full card and without the world. Because when you get to the world, you have to be accepted in this new phase that is portrayed in the back of the Hermes. And these authors they put that idea in the cards, the beginning and the end with the same character and kind of like the same message. You have to go back to the beginning to finish it.
Yeah, I kind of have a little imagination that it's almost as if they're kind of saying that intuition in this case is kind of the impetus for everything that follows. Like it's the hunch at the very beginning that's not even necessarily rational, but it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know why I should go to this thing, but I just have a hunch that I should go through this arid landscape.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's almost like, again, I'll bring out the transcendent function, which is it goes beyond the duality, which is so represented in the judgment. It's just as it is in the second card, the priestess that sits next to two pillars, but she's seated, she's small, she's still reading. This guy, he's got it all figured out now. He has the vehicle, the spiritual vehicle necessary to go between the two worlds. And he has the path, is right there, it's already been made. Whereas, and of course, all those that haven't done it yet are wanting that. So it's something that makes people come alive.
Mhm.
And whereas in the magician, he has none of this figured out. He's suddenly here presenting the options of duality and instruments to play with. So he points below, he points above. Whereas the judgment figure has the golden helmet with the wings, and he also has it on his feet. So he's complete. He's got it above and he's got it below. So that ties in the underworld with the world above. He's got him. He is embodying both worlds.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point that you bring up. What in the magician card seems to be maybe intuition undeveloped versus it being developed and fully honed in the judgment card. It kind of seems like it's intuition for weal or for woe in each of the cards.
The path is made. He's made the path. It's right there. The steps are right behind him. That leads him into the outer world and into the underworld. The magician has no path. He's trying to figure out which way to go.
I have a few thoughts about these cards coming from, generally speaking, Western culture, I would say. So not Greek and not Egyptian. The magician card, when I looked at his position with the arms and that sort of dynamism of it, I thought, what was I looking at today that looked like that? And what it was the portrait of Napoleon by Jean-Louis David, where he's sitting on a horse and the horse is really, galloping up, and Napoleon's arms are in that position. And the feeling that I always get from that painting is that he's acting on his intuition, that he's acting on impulse, that he's just saying, if I just go this way and all you guys follow me, like it's just going to be, the greatest success ever. And so that was what I felt about the posture of the magician. But then the crossroads, and I was glad that you used that word, Raquel, because it is the word in folk music tradition, which goes, way back in fairy tale tradition, where you have a crossroads. And for example, the blues singer Robert Johnson was supposed to have made a deal with the devil at the crossroads, like in his real life. It is the myth of Robert Johnson. But all the songs, and there are so many of them, and what I'm thinking of mostly is the Elizabethan ballads known as child ballads, because they were collected by a man named Childs. So they were originally collected in Elizabethan times, so that's Shakespearean times, right? And before Shakespeare, this is these stories of coming to a crossroads, and then you have to make your choice. And essentially, you're either making a deal with the devil or you're following your divine path, and you don't know, and you can't know. And that's what thousands of songs are about. And rock and roll very much came from that, right? It just put a little sexuality in it in many cases, but basically it's the crossroads. So that was what I thought in the Magician card. And in the Judgment card, what kind of tied to that was that view out through the back, just reminded me of all of those medieval and Renaissance paintings that just kept having that background, right? I mean, the Mona Lisa, and then you have the background. Just hundreds, thousands of paintings, and they would paint that little, it was like a miniature landscape, which was supposed to tell you another story. So it was like two parallel stories. One is foreground and the other is background. And the one that's background is kind of equally valid and generally has paths. And this one has the path, which is the T intersection, which is essentially a dead end, right? So those were the aspects of these two cards that particularly resonated for me.
I'll add something that just came to me because, you know, as we all share, something turns up. This is not as obvious, but when one looks at the Magician, the background has two rivers on either side coming in, and they meet and he is standing in the very center, and then it keeps going, right? And that center is it's like here in the third eye where things change and go the other way, but he hasn't figured it out yet. So that's why he doesn't have a helmet with gold that he knows, but his entire body is what is presenting in order to find out that he is that center, and that center, third eye, where it all meets, needs to develop in order to reach the place where it has already manifested and has skill in the Judgment card. He's standing right there. So what's in front of him is the rest of the body, that creates the manifestation of physicality, which is the rest of the body in many ways, since it is mercurial. So his entire figure is standing where the helmet and the head would be up here, ready to manifest something. But he needs to use his whole body to do so. Whereas by the other one, by the Judgment already has his body grew, and he is in the center of it. And when Annabelle refers to the background, it's a window. So a lot of those paintings have it because there was a window or portal to a reality that's on the other side, or a reality that shows a different world, as she mentioned. But he's seated, he's standing like here, but it's his entire body that's there that needs to come on board, not just his intellect or his intuition only. He has to play with everything. So that's just something. I know it might be intuitive, but in this card, my sense is that he has to use his body as well, not just the intellect.
I think it's also very funny that we're talking about a lot of stuff, and when I think about talking about tons of streaming together, weaving together so many different threads of conversation, the adjective that comes to mind is mercurial. If I drink too much coffee, I am very mercurial in conversation.
I think that what Annabelle said about the Napoleon image that came to your mind, I think it's very interesting because in this Magician card, I think Hermes has a very innocent image. And I actually thought about a little bit about heroes or about leaders What if they were absolutely honest about what they were doing and not actually having this image that made everyone else engage with him, because it's also an image of hope and action and moving forward, you know? And I think that this is also kind of like this, the image of Hermes as a trickster, you know, because you have to actually lure people to come with you, you know, to make a movement actually. You don't really know what that movement is, but you have to bring that out of the other person, you know. So this is why I think that in this, the first image in the magician, Hermes is actually childish almost, you know, he's an innocent. So when he's pointing at a certain path, you kind of like, yeah, I have to make a choice. So that's probably good for now. You're not going to think about the consequences, you know. And whereas in the judgment card, I think that the image that's also always in the background, even in the Renaissance paintings, is about the contrast of what is actually going on within someone and what is happening outside in the world. You know, in this judgment card, you can see that the world is thriving, you know, everything is going on out there and the life keeps going, you know, but inside things are starting to come from the dead, you know. So I think this is also interesting.
Raquel, I'm curious if you think there's anything in this card about the story of Demeter and Persephone.
Oh yeah,
It had to do
it
with
has.
the harvest, and Hermes, I think in that story, right, takes Demeter to see Persephone in the underworld. Eventually,
Yes.
probably brings her back.
And in this tarot deck, Persephone is actually in this environment as well. And she's also has, because this, Gilda is right, this is the place where the Empress card is, and the Empress card is Demeter. So, and Persephone is in this environment, and her mother's world is in the back, in her back.
Mhm.
So it's also about the High Priestess card is Persephone's card. The High Priestess card in this tarot deck is about a traumatic experience that pushes us to adulthood life, because she was torn away from her mother. So she began her initiation into adulthood without her being conscious or without her wanting that experience. So it's both of these cards in the same background, which is pretty interesting as well.
That is very interesting. I wrote a paper a couple of months ago talking about that story, and at one point in the paper, I tried to make a point about how often people will describe somebody who's kind of naive as being a bit green.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting to kind of think about that as like, well, Persephone's just out kind of wandering the field, just like, picking flowers. And
yeah.
she's like captured and taken into the underworld. And it's like, you know, spring, it seems to have a lot to do with greenness and Persephone, and then the harvest later at the end of the summer with Ceres or Demeter. Anyways,
but there is a part in that story where Persephone is aware that if she's collecting, I don't know what the name of the plant is, but if she's collecting that type of plant, Hades was going to come after her. So it was not completely oblivious. She just seems to be green, but she's not actually completely green.
Is it the Narcissus?
No, it's not.
No. Okay.
I also saw something that is rather esoteric here. Playing with symbols, the background of the magician if you follow the river, the shape of it goes like this, in and out, and which is what I was trying to say. And then the rocks in front of him, and then they open like this, which it looks like a key, a place where you place a key. And he's standing there, and that is the same shape of the entwined serpents that Hermes is holding in judgment. He's holding it right where the magician is standing. So he's now, and the fire is already lit, and he carries the sun. You know that the background is showing that there's sun in the back. That's for sun, light, and he's bringing that light to the underworld in order for them to follow the light in the steps in the path that he has already made. But it's the same shape that he's holding in his hand that is right here, depicted with the rocks. Then there's the round, and then it opens. And he's standing, like his position where he is standing is right where the judgment is. Hermes is holding what is that symbol called?
The Caduceus?
The caduceus, exactly. Thank you. Yes, he's holding it right here, right where the fire goes up, and the three things only three things come out of there. The two equal duality with the fire rising right through the middle. And that is where the magician is standing as a boy, that he doesn't have a grasp of it yet. He is the fire, but he hasn't made the fire blossom or where he can grab it. It's if you follow the rivers like this, it goes like this, and then in, and then round, and then it opens. It's also like a key, like the keyhole where you can put in the key. And
I think
there's where
it's-
he has all his objects, right at the keyhole.
Yeah. I think these are just pathways. They're not rivers, actually. I think they're just, I don't think that's rivers.
Well, whatever. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, but your
Whatever
point
it
is well taken about it.
Yeah.
The Caduceus not being something that he's grasped yet.
Yes.
It's not
he
something
doesn't.
that he's able to employ.
He stands there, though, where in the same place where the judgment card is grabbing it. So he has skillfully grabbed that potential and made it into the trinity. He has a trinity grasp.
Yeah. And the caduceus in the magician is representative of the one suit. So in the judgment, it's kind of like this idea that only the spirit is remaining because it's the fire element and the one suit.
And notice he stands in the middle of two. You've got on the left the little, and on the other, and the judgment, he's standing in the middle. He's the third, representing that fire, that rod that goes up the caduceus. He's embodying it because he's got the gold under control up here.
It is kind of like triangle shape in both of these cards.
Yeah,
if you look at it.
symbols. It's like a keyhole.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he has all his his implements are exactly where you stick a key and move it. So he needs to get that key and get going. But I always it's one of my favorite things in tarot decks is where they're looking and why. So here he's looking out into here. He's pointing up here, pointing down there, yet he's looking in front of him. So he's not focused. And judgment is coming. He has it all, and he's looking down. He's going to bring these up into the level that he has achieved. He's going to bring them up from the underworld. So he's
Yeah.
looking down.
And he's much more serious as well. Kind of like if you
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
about rock songs, you're gonna take a message about how you chose the wrong path, you know.
He's focused
Yeah.
and knows his stuff.
Yeah.
The other one is kind of bewildered. Oh, you know. And his head is, it's interesting that even both their heads are in the same position, cocked a little bit to the side, but the one is focusing
Yeah,
and this one is
but
still, looking out
they're
into where.
both looking at different angles, I think.
Yeah, completely different. So how about you have the other sample of the judgment card, like the rider deck you showed?
It does have in this.
That one is a bit
Just-
different. It's
I also just want to say, as a point of comparison, I quite like the Mythic Tarot version of this Judgment card, because it seems as if I know you said that the High Priestess card is the card of Persephone. It's really interesting. If we take the numerological method comparison, the Judgment is the 20 card, which reduces down to 2, which is then the High Priestess card, or the Persephone card in this deck. And I don't know what the imagery of that card looks like in this deck, but if we think about the Rider-Waite deck, the High Priestess is seated between a black and a white pillar as well.
Yeah.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's
But she's
in the-
seated. This guy's standing. He's got it figured out.
Right. I'm just pointing out the two pillars.
Yeah, they're the same, pretty much. But that's why this card gives one the impression that he has fulfilled a certain trinity. He is the pillar of the height of the number 3, which is activated, and the high priestess seated with her scroll is still some things are still secret or uncovered. They're not yet out. She hasn't yet embodied those in its full regalia in the outer world, or in different places. And I always wonder this one, see, because these people are not. There's a young boy there, so he's waking up. This is a birth. It's not like they are coming out of a box, but behind there's also people standing, a couple and another child. That's right. So that's double. The 2 is showing also not only the people in the front, but is showing the same thing in the background. So that the 2 is, again, features 2 families, 2 births are taking place from the 3rd thing, which is the angel waking them up. So,
I think I can show you guys the High Priestess card if you like.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
so I've always, when I discovered that is also when one can traverse the
I'm gonna
cards,
pause this
major
sharing.
arcana, from the top to the bottom, from the high number to the low number, and it's also a journey that is quite valid.
Can you guys see
It's
this?
quite interesting.
No.
No.
Not yet.
Okay, just let me stop all the sharing so I can take the actual.
Yeah, see, there are the pillars, but she's not seated.
No, she's not seated. She's holding her flowers and between the 2 pillars and
Yeah.
her mother's place.
Mhm. Right.
And this is it's not an apple, it's,
The pomegranate,
Pomegranate,
yeah.
which is also so freaking interesting. I didn't think about this, but in the back of the High Priestess card of the Rider-Waite deck or the Bota deck, she's seated before the veil, but on the veil, in the shape of the tree of life, are palm trees and pomegranates.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Here she's holding it. And yeah, when I saw that window, I said, that reminds me of the Empress. The Empress has the background of the Empress is very much like that window. So it's taking you to card number 3, the activation of the 2.
Yeah. But it's always in this tarot deck, depending on the combination, is always about a very traumatic experience, is about a very traumatic initiation in adulthood. And it's something that marks a person. And it's something that it begins with a type of grief, but it becomes the base of a personal power if the person can deal with that pain and that grief. So it's pretty important. Also, the idea of being separated from your mother, you know, the idea of being separated from like the major source of life that you had. And then you have to reinvent yourself to start over again in a place where, well, this is the underworld. So you can like believe that everything is dead, you know, so you can, it's an initiation of life where everything else is dead. It's kind of like the Magician card as well, you know, all in the background is just rocks and sand. You know, there is no aspect of life except for the Hermes character, you know.
But now it seems that here she has access to the path.
Yeah, but she cannot go back. That is the
curse.
Hades agreement is not like that. I mean, he does give her the opportunity to go back to her mother, but then she doesn't want to because she realizes in her story that without her mother, she can grow to whatever she wants. Other than when she is alongside Demeter, she will only be whatever her mother wants her to be, and she doesn't want that anymore.
That's a nice detail. You know, I learned this deck just by using it, right? I didn't, and I used it for many, but over 20 years. And it speaks. It also has many beautiful cards that are full of life in their colors and the way there's the water and the trees. That's why
it seems like such a great way to learn Greek mythology too, to be able to interact with the stories.
Yeah. It's a great way to remember as well, to memorize everything. I'm gonna go
get the juicy part of being able to use it as a divination deck.
I'm gonna go back to the other screen, so just stop this.
Now we need to get it somewhere, refurbish our deck, which is in dire straits.
Here. Can you guys see this?
Right. Yeah. So you see how he has 2 families, one in the front and one in the back. So he's waking up everybody. And so it's very much like a birth in my estimation. And does someone know exactly what is that the Christian cross, that flag related to Christianity?
I believe so. In the Rider-Waite deck, it's also the cross that the child in the sun card holds up as he rides the horse, I believe.
Yeah, I think I think Christianity kind of went in here. So it's about birth versus rising the dead, because it's rising everybody. It's rising the adults, the children, and in the background too. Are they in boats in the background, or from the waters of the second chakra, say from the waters of the sacred, its life is coming out of the womb. So in many ways, it is also a strictly, in many ways, a birth card. If
Yeah.
one starts from, well, we are already the world, and what do we do next? Well, now we are born, and then what do we do next? Oh, there's darkness, that there's sunshine, and then what do we do next? Oh, darkness, I don't know what to do, the moon. So you can also go the other way. You can go up and you can come down, which is also a nice thing about the underworld or the above world. You can go either way and learn the journey is pretty much full. It's all there, no matter which way you go.
Yeah, but I think that the birth, the waking up, all the personas in the Rider-Waite deck, it's much more clear, the idea and the image, because here you only have mummified bodies and kind of like, you don't really know what you're waking up. And you're not completely aware of the image that is coming up from those memories as well.
Yeah.
I think that Rider-Waite and Marseille, they have like a more clear image of what is coming up. Actually, I think waking up a memory, you kind of like see exactly what it is. Whereas in this card, you're not aware of what it's like, this body is like anymore, or what this memory is about. And I think this card, the Judgment, in this deck allows us to think about memory itself, because sometimes what we remember, sometimes it changes with time, and it doesn't mean that our memory is frail or wrong. It's just we can recreate our past as well, which is something really hard to do consciously or to understand rationally without judging yourself by doing it,
There's a point that I'll say this, and we'll see how it fits within the conversation that we're having now. So the Hebrew letter associated with the Judgment card is the letter Shin, and it's also the element fire. And as I've said several times in the past, each Hebrew letter has a pictograph associated with it as well. And the pictograph or the symbol associated with Shin is a tooth, particularly like a molar tooth. And it's meant to kind of express this idea of the breaking down of forms, of like, whether it be how when we eat food, we take in food, we chew it, we release the energy that's in the food to then take on the form of energy for us to use for whatever we choose to use it for, I suppose. But it expresses this idea of fire as a mode of breaking something down. I think it's also interesting to think about judgment. People say trial by fire or judgment by fire, or that kind of expression. And to me, it all kind of plays to this idea of fire as like, well, also, since we're talking about Mercury and Hermes, the patron deity of alchemy was Mercurius as well, and had so much to do with stripping away the dross through fire, burning away the illusions that we hold about things. And it's a really kind of subtle point, but I think it's interesting and valuable and valid, I suppose, because it seems to me to say that at this point, it's like the fire is just burning everything away, burning our illusions, our preconceived notions away, and waking us back up.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
What number is this letter? Shin?
What do you mean, what number?
Yes. What number in the alphabet? Well, you said it was reminds you of the letter Shin, right?
Well, I was just saying that's like if we go back to the Crowley deck.
What number is the letter?
Well, the
It's assigned
card
to
is the
that
20th
letter.
card, but I mean each Hebrew letter has a numerical value associated with it too. And for
Right.
Shin it's 300.
Okay. Oh, 300. Well, interesting that because I see in this card as well as the Rider deck, it's all about Trinity. It's waking up three. It's waking up the three, which is already the one, the two, the duality together that gives a third thing. You can put it into alchemy, they fuse this with that and you get a third thing, and it's totally Mercury. And the fact that life is multiplied by the one and the two, then you have it. So 3 here, 3 in the other one. So the 3 seems to be consistent in the different decks.
Mhm.
He's waking up the possibility of Trinity
Yeah.
to
Yeah, and
come
it's really
alive with fire. The fire allows that 1 and 2 to become 3. Without it, it doesn't mobilize into the third thing. So the other one, if you show the Rider deck, it always has 3, 2, 3, 3, 3. So,
Mhm.
and he's
Yeah.
the fourth, the one with the fire.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, that all of the cards, there seems to be a common denominator of fire in every card we've looked at. And I think it's also relevant to think of the notion that, no energy is, what is it? All the energy that ever was or will be is here, and it's never destroyed, it just changes forms. I think that paired with the notion of fire, stripping down those forms and changing that same energy into something else is kind of what I was driving at, but I'll get off that.
Yeah.
What is
yes? Trinity.
what is the alchemical process of burning things up?
The-
Um,
you
Is it-
use
I think calcinadio.
yeah, calcinadio, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, also, there's so many different processes in alchemy that people talk about, but really the one that's kind of central is sulfur, salt, and mercury.
Yeah.
Going to everything we've been talking about with mercury.
Yes, that number 3 thing, the Trinity, the symbolism of the 3, which is what transforms into something completely new.
We were talking about the white flag with the red cross on it before that was in the judgment. And one of the things that was making me think of was the crossroads in the magician card, because both of these, both the Marseille and the Rider Waite, have a even, the strokes are even and the center is a square. So it's got, those 5 parts, right? One part coming in, one part here, one part here, one part here. And then the 5th part is that, sort of magical place because they're even. But I was wondering whether it might have had something to do with the Crusades. Just also because of the period of the Marseille deck anyway. Not so I did a quick looking up, and that wasn't really so strong in the definitions that I just found looking quickly. But what was there was that it was a cross of St. George and St. George conquering the dragon, which I thought was an interesting reference in terms of what we're talking about, especially where it is this, portal. Yeah, the portal was a good word that you had, Gilda, about a portal into Hades or hell, or, you know, whatever that choice is, which is the deal with the devil, or else it's that opposing portal, which is the portal to, you know, that kind of fantasy land of beauty and wealth and so much reaping what we sow and all that stuff, instead of the crashing disaster going the other way of just giving everything up. So the flag, I thought was touching on some of that, if it had to do with St. George also.
You know, that's the famous, since you like these comparisons, of the Swiss gear. That is the Swiss gear logo. You know, from all the suitcases and all the bags, Swiss gear
Well, it's
has
the
that
Swiss flag.
white with the red.
Well,
white
it's
with the
Swiss,
red.
it is the Swiss flag. I was just looking
Yeah, that
kind
too.
of for the
But,
Swiss flag.
You know, what I really like about, I mean, the Rider Waite deck is not famous for nothing. It's really an amazing deck. It's one of the very few where actual sound is actually displayed. The horn has these lines coming right out of it. So sound is actually here visually displayed. And we don't see that anywhere. Sound is not really displayed.
I think both the Christian imagery in this card and also the trumpet particularly, and also now with the mention of St. George and the dragon, the triumph over the dragon, all have to do with the book of Revelation.
Exactly.
That book, which, you know, I'm not professing to be extremely familiar with the contents of the book, but I do recall that there's the idea of the angel blowing the trumpet at the end of time. And there's also the red dragon of the apocalypse.
Yes.
And, you know, it comes at the end of the Bible, and it's the ending of the biblical narrative. It's the eschatological arc where things are called back up into the heavens.
Yeah.
It plays quite nicely with the idea of a waking up, a wake up call.
I'm also remembering like probably the beginning of the Red Book of Jung, because I think that the start is very catastrophic, and I think it's important that even in these images, how the beginning is probably an aspect of termination, in a sense, of ending, you know?
You said termination?
Yeah.
In the beginning card.
And both of them, I think the magician and the judgment, I think in different ways, but they are portraying much more death, and nothing is construct, nothing is done. And both of these cards are actually powerful cards that tells us about starting something new, beginning something, probably giving birth to something, creating life or creating something. But how can you create in such a barren state, you know, like such just...
Yeah. I think that that's also wrapped up in the idea of Hermes as being the god of the crossroads, because, you know, with every choice for something is also a negation. There's also a termination of the other choice.
Yeah, but also just referring to the practical life, I think that both of these cards shows us that the beginning of something big is not pretty. The beginning of something big is not placed around in a very nurture space, you know, like. And I think this is very important for especially our generation, that thinks that every beginning is just this blossom of everything and life and color, and, you know, It's nothing like that, actually. It's the opposite. I think I'm just correlating to the Jung's Red Book because he created so much with that, and also at being at his worst stage in life, I think, and his worst mental stage.
Mhm.
And with that, he created a powerful work of art, probably.
I mean, not only was it it's a powerful work of art, but it's also the nucleus of all of his well-known work. I mean, he says at several points, I think probably in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections specifically, that the Red Book was pretty much the seed of everything that he's come to be known for. And it wasn't published until 2010, and it kind of changed the way that everybody thought about his work. But to the effect of what you're saying about the beginning being, excuse my language, but shitty, you're just in the mud.
Yeah.
I think that that's particularly true of Jung's Red Book period.
I think that Jung brought in spirituality and a world where it was dominated by science. And since he was also scientific, it couldn't really be denied. But he was. And it took a very long time and actually just now, because that's why it wasn't published, because if the more esoteric stuff would be published, and it would give fuel to all of those who wanted to brand him out of the position which he is so big. And, so that bigness was not acknowledged by the industry, which was the one that he pioneered something new. So now, because there's no one else or nothing else, and because spirituality is coming on board, then suddenly, who else can you look into? He's so big.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but like if you've read any of his books, like it's not exactly like he pulled the curtain over what he was really up to.
No, he didn't.
He
didn't, but the people around that were dominant in what was happening had some other idea as to what's true. They're in charge. But he attracted so many people, and every of all that were prominent in all kinds of studies, that it just became just overwhelmingly big. I mean, I went in New York. I would have studied and become a Jungian analyst, and all I could find was Freud in New York City. That you no class in the University of Jung, nothing. Now, I took a course on interpretation of dreams by Freud, and Freud had things going on. And so since I did astrology, I wanted to find Jung. And I looked for a place in New York City, and I found an office in some floor, which I visited, and some woman comes from in there. It was more like a home office something, and nothing. There was nothing. That was it. Nothing else ever, until now that I met somebody who went into Jungian analysis, was I ever now able to reclaim what I searched for long ago, that was in a place of New York City that you have, really, no. It just wasn't something that was published. It was, but only to those people who had access. But it wasn't taught in schools, in the universities. So,
but of course, this was before the Red Book was published, right?
Yes, it was in the in the 80s,
so he was already
late 80s and 90s.
So he was labeled a weirdo well before the Red Book was published.
Right. And that's why they didn't publish a lot of some of his most esoteric stuff, because he really was a kind of a mystic, and mystics were not well regarded. Scientists had that department pretty much held as this is the truth
Hmm.
and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Yeah.
So he brought God, the fact that, you know, we can't do without the inner world. And so he, since he was a doctor to begin with, he brought it into the picture, and now is starting to be known by those who may wish to study him.
Hey, Raquel, do you have more slides that you're wanting to go through?
No, I can stop my share now.
Okay. I mean, you don't have to. I'm just curious. I didn't want us to stand in the way of you getting through what you had.
No,
left.
that was all that I wanted to.
Okay, great.
So these are so familiar to me because I used them for so long. It's got the it's in Portuguese, right? What's up there? The title is in Portuguese.
Yeah, it's all in Portuguese.
Yeah. Imagine they have it there and they don't have it here now. What do you make of that?
They have what there?
The tarot deck. The mythic tarot.
The mythic tarot.
You don't have a mythic tarot deck here?
No. Not the older edition, the first edition.
Yeah. Here in Brazil, we still have the old edition.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
The original.
Oh, so this really was a treat to see this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the original.
Well, they
edition.
were great cards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here they've moved on to a different version. And then
I have a question that might be kind of off topic, but I guess now since we're through the main portion of the presentation, it might be interesting to talk about. I know in one of the first slides, you mentioned something about the magician having to do with forethought. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah. I'm just going to look it up.
I wonder if you know what card in the Mythic Tarot has to do with Prometheus. Is he represented in the cards?
Oh, yeah. The Hanged Man.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I recently came to know that Prometheus and Epimetheus apparently mean Prometheus means forethought and Epimetheus means afterthought.
Do you want to see the card? I can.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Just
forethought is being attacked by the eagle to eat his liver. So they can multiply and make it an afterthought.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, I was reading about it in one of Edward Edinger's books, and he was talking about, you know, Prometheus as forethought and kind of trying to establish a parallel between man's capacity to kind of bargain with the future, to plan, to exercise forethought, more or less. And I thought that was really interesting, and I think that's, I can certainly also see that in the magician as well. So it seems relevant.
A modern word for that might be negotiate. It's like, can we negotiate with the gods? But in spiritual practice, sometimes at the end, maybe near the judgment card, there is no negotiation. It's more like a communion.
Well, yeah, I think negotiation is probably yes, the best term. And it's also interesting how it seems like, there's forethought and there's afterthought, but there's not really any emphasis on present thought. And it's like, without the capacity for forethought, mankind is just trapped in the present, trapped in surviving, not necessarily able to stock up meat for the future, or stock up grain for the future, or plan for anything beyond the present state of survival. And I guess
I always thought that the present doesn't really exist because it's always being made. It's always in the process of being. So people say all the time, "Oh, stay in the present is the but the present is always being realized. It's never really settled. It's always being realized."
Yeah.
So in reality, the Tibetans have it good there. It's empty because it's always from the past, from the future, where it's always constantly changing in order to become. There it is. It's going to eat its liver.
Yeah, and I guess that forethought is the fire that Prometheus stills. That really, and it's really interesting. That Prometheus stills fire, and this whole time we've been talking about fire as well.
Yeah, in this card, Prometheus is atoning for his sin to have stolen the fire from the gods. But in this moment is the realization of the bigger meaning that is behind that action of stealing the fire, because he actually will be the door to someone else to end their pain. He doesn't know that in that moment, but that is the conclusion of his tale, because I think it's important that he has a 4 upside down, which is the astrological sign of Jupiter. And Chiron is actually the one that takes his place, that asks for the gods to take his place so he can die. And Chiron became the constellation of Sagittarius that is ruled by Jupiter. So the expansion of Prometheus, even though he didn't know that, was the door for the creation of not the creation, but the end of the pain of someone else.
Sounds like Jesus Christ.
Yeah, not only the humankind, because he stole the fire of the gods for humankind, but also for another creature.
Always had to wrestle with the Jesus Christ thing, dying for humanity's sins.
Yeah.
That whole thing always had me tripped, and still does.
And the eagle in this card is actually Zeus, the one that judged him, but also the one that keeps eating his liver.
The liver is one of those organs that it's major. It has all these connotations in mystical life.
Yeah, in that same book that I mentioned by Edward Edinger, he also goes on to say that apparently at this point in time, I assume he means the Greeks, but maybe people more generally also thought that the liver was the seat of the soul.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a big place.
Which is quite interesting.
It's definitely a portal. Just like the brain, just like the head, just like the heart, the liver is also a portal in and of its own.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, if we think about the soul, or the Greek word psyche or psyche, as being like this thing that really connects earth with whatever else there is, beyond that, as being like in this middle position that mediates the above and the below. I think, Prometheus kind of plays a very similar role to that. If I understand it correctly, it's like before this point in time, the gods were just up on Olympus doing whatever the gods do, and humans were down on earth struggling to survive and live only in the present moment. It's like he established and forged this connection between both of these worlds, effectively bringing the two together and acting as this kind of bridge. So all of those facets of the story and the liver and everything all kind of seem to play to the same point.
What we find interesting, because Robert Place, in his website, he does a lot of research in tarot, and much earlier, this figure was standing up, and is related to, and the foot, just like he has it, was behind the knee, right? In order to balance, he had to learn to balance things. And what was interesting that he couldn't quite figure it out, but that the ankle was chained, to like that was chained, but he's standing up. That means he can't go anywhere. He's got to stay there on one leg, balancing to figure out how, the balance that needs to come on board in order to take the next step. Because here, for example, and then they say that a publisher turned it around, and then since then it became upside down. The image became upside down, and his right leg doesn't look like it's tagged to anything. It looks like it's loose. Only the left, and the left is, of course, we know that the left is the lunar side of things, the underworld, the unconscious.
Yeah, it's also very interesting that, he's in the exact same position that Christ was crucified.
And he looks like Christ to me.
Yeah,
The head, the whole
like
thing
Christ.
is like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, there seems to be a similarity between the role that Christ played as kind of like a mediator between his wrathful father and humans, and Prometheus as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd really like to get hold of this deck.
Oh, let me know if you find a vase. Let me know if you can get one from Brazil, and I'll.
Yeah.
Well, I would probably just opt for the new one, given that I don't know, apart from seeing Raquel's here, I don't know the old one, so I wouldn't know the difference. I would probably just go for the more convenient new version, since it's.
But it's nothing like it. It's completely
This
different.
is the old one. This is the old one.
Yeah.
Is it really that different? I mean, is it
different? That the whole sense of it, the whole color, the chariot card. I mean, it's got a whole different phenomenon. It's like if you ask me, is the youth from the 60s different than the youth from the millenniums or something? I mean, it's just two different realities, but they're using the same exact book, the same story, and they're just emphasizing different things. The warriors are standing kind of like feminine postures. Maybe they're trying to say that man is now becoming more feminine, or whatever else. The skies are kind of thunderous. It's got all these little tweaks going on that just kills. It just changes completely the nature of. Also, the woman, the hair is really all curly all the time. The woman's body is kind
the
of
hanged man. You can
masculine. It's got all these things going on.
The magician here, it's pretty different.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, it is qualitatively quite different.
Yeah, it's different.
It seems almost like sterile.
It's like that they wanted to infuse a new spirit of the male and female in the modern world, from the one that was portrayed in the original deck.
Oh, this is horrible.
Yeah, you see, it's just the whole
I'm
thing.
sorry.
Yeah, it's different. It just loses. It lost the refinement and the openness that's available in the original.
Yeah, this is really different.
And they really emphasize these like the dark hair and the red hair. I mean, it just doesn't go together. In my estimation, you can tell it's just kind of deliberately things were emphasized for with an objective behind. And the little
This
book
is
we have, very beautiful little black book, and it has it all, and it's very small. And the new book is huge, and it
yeah,
uses
this
so much
one.
paper and all of that, and it doesn't really it says exactly the same thing.
Oh, here the judgment.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
different it is.
Yeah, and they all stand kind of a feminine. I mean, you've got warriors, and they're standing like they like shifty, like they're not. I mean, come on, a warrior stands solid on the ground, otherwise it's gonna be knocked out.
Did
Right.
you say it seems like a copyright issue?
I-
It
that-
is. Yeah.
I can understand why that would be,
Hmm.
because I'm sure the woman still lives who did those drawings in England, and I mean, I'm sure she'll be more than happy to have the deck again printed. So I don't know.
I think she just uses her images on her own because she does have a website. The illustrator of these images, she does have her own website.
Yeah.
With these images, with this tarot deck as well.
And that's Juliet Sherman Burke.
No, it's Trisha Newell. I'm gonna write it down.
The artist.
Yeah,
She
she's
was
the artist.
Okay.
I mean, there's to be able to capture in a tarot deck characters and all of that without making them mundane nowadays, because we have access to so much availability for creating images. It's really an art to have it be archetypical and all of this, that is not doesn't land specifically. Like I can look at it as Greek. Oh yeah, it's not overly this or overly that. They're kind of universal. The portrayal of the figures are rather universal, whereas in a new deck it makes them more defined and definite in look. You know, they tried to portray every single race or this, that, or the curly hair, this and then it just kind of ruins the
Oh my
aesthetics.
God. I think I found in Amazon one.
Maybe the gods are listening.
Yeah, maybe not, because it's kind of like it's so much money in this
Exactly.
deck.
It's
that
just ridiculous. It's yeah.
Oh my God.
That's what I mean.
$900?
Yeah, it's beyond comprehension. You can go to Brazil, buy one, and come back with that money, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're not gonna.
You can buy a
Cost
plane
that
ticket, go visit Brazil, buy a deck. But now, because we mentioned that, guess what? They're going to be after those decks, because that's how it works.
Yeah.
So how much could you get one for, Raquel?
They're not expensive.
Well, here in Brazil, probably $5.
Yeah, I mean, you understand now. You
Not
understand?
kidding.
Can you wrap your rational Cancer mind and Sagittarius mind around that reality?
Because here, Brazil's coin is very it's devalued right now. So like $1 is like $10 for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like $60 for me, $6 for you guys.
Yeah.
And I must have paid, I don't know, 20 something.
Yeah. The problem is the shipping. The shipping can cost like $500, even for a book.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The problem is the shipping.
Insane. Separation at its
Especially
highest
due
numbers.
to COVID, because my
Yeah.
president is a psycho. So
Yeah.
nobody's shipping anything for
Yeah,
us
but it
anymore.
started before COVID too. It started also in Peru and in different countries. because we had an experience with a blanket.
Before COVID, Brazil had a good
Yeah,
exchange with other countries. I mean, shipping was not that
it
expensive.
wasn't a big deal.
It was not a big deal, actually.
Yeah, it happened in, like I said, in Peru and in Central America as well. It wasn't a big deal, and from night to day, something's happening, and they and they blame it on Trump, but he's a scapegoat. Something else was going on, and then COVID hit. First was Trump, then COVID. So now we are on the third stage. Maybe this will be the Trinity, and something good will do.
Oh, it's getting expensive here in Brazil.
See what I
But
mean? Because they
yeah.
heard us.
Yeah.
I have tested it so many times. If I don't say anything,
It's $100. It's just $10
nothing.
for you guys.
Well, you see what I mean? We can't. And then Nicholas, he loves that he's of the persuasion that one should share and share. And the more I do, then these things this is exactly what happens. And it's no longer available for the little person. So we have an issue with that.
Is that an ontological claim?
Well, now we're very careful as to, but here we, what we say, and especially online, where it becomes immediately, it travels like oxygen.
Yeah, it does.
And
travel
it
like
hits
oxygen.
hydrogen, and suddenly the price becomes, I don't know, the price of gold. And I don't know why that is. They can continue printing those decks. It's not like, they can't print those decks.
I've asked a few people or just typed in a few different times on YouTube if anybody has any questions. There have been lots of comments, but I don't think there have been that many questions, if any at all. So I wonder if it would, just for these last couple of minutes, be kind of fun to broach the question of what do you think the role of the trickster is? If we want to ask the question, what's the role of the trickster in individuation, or just in development, or why is that something that people should even consider? That's something that we could.
Do you have the book that one of a Jung analyst wrote about the tarot? She developed and she develops the trickster, but as she develops as the fool, that the trickster was always necessary in order to all the rulers and so on to be able to get a perspective of what was going on without killing the guy or becoming upset that you're saying something to me, the fights and things that go on, the wars. It was able to
the court gesture.
Yes, it was able
But
to
she
express.
Raquel, the book is called Jung and Tarot, an Archetypal Journey.
Oh, it is a
by
fabulous
Sally
book.
Nichols. I'll type that into
Oh, yeah. I know.
You have it?
It's a phenomenal book.
Yeah,
and it's, to my knowledge, I think one of the only books, if not the only book, which really brings together Jung and tarot, which is, an unexplored area or underdeveloped. But in that book, she makes a distinction between, she's using both the Fool
Here's the book
and the Magician. Right, yeah. She makes a distinction in that book where she's kind of using the Fool and the Magician as two, as the dual aspects of the trickster. One being like the trickster that's kind of just like the court jester that like she references, the Shakespearean jester, which he used in his plays and stuff, and which I've talked about before when we talked about the Fool on here, and she, makes a kind of playful use of how apparently, things would be really serious in the court, and the court jester would just come in and like crack a fart or something, which is funny, at the same time, it kind of, I think expresses something pretty true about the kind of place a gesture and being like, being a little bit, I guess, keeping things light and being playful. But then also she transitions into talking about the magician as the trickster, as being like a more exalted form of the trickster, or something that's really kind of in service to the good. And, I think that that's pretty apparent in street magicians or magicians like Harry Houdini, which I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit when I talked about the magician card myself. But it just seems like it has some role to play in the development of people, and I think that'd be an interesting topic of conversation for a little bit.
Because a lot of the fools were seen as dumb. They were, literally called the dumb one, or the so they had that cast to them, even though they could say all sorts of things, or they were mentally dumb or something. Whereas the magician is more of a player that's not so dumb, that's not referred to as being stupid or dumb or something. Is he's more in the world, moving around, still being a trickster, but he's not labeled as inferior in physically or his capacity. And most of the time the fools were labeled inferior or maimed or something, and that also allowed them not to be killed or
Yeah, well, that's probably a facade they were using to protect themselves.
right, something like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I also believe that the trickster of the magician aspect is more about, I think every ritual that we have, every social ritual that we have is kind of like, there's this trickster side of it, because it convinces us to doing something. And I think that is the idea also of the trickster, to get us to a certain point. But in order to do that, it has to create a convincing image of what we are about to do, or what are we about to get. We have to kind of like be consciously convinced that this path is the right path. But I think that the idea of being a trickster is just to get us to a movement, just to get us to do something. It doesn't matter what we are doing. And the ritual in itself, it doesn't really have a meaning other that place or that time in the world, So I think we have to be like
Nutty.
And
a little crazy here and there.
Crazy, but we have to be tricked into doing some things, or else we're not gonna do. I think this is why I thought that the analogy of Annabelle was so good, especially remember Napoleon. If he was honest 100% of the time, he would not have followers.
Yeah, I think I think you put your finger right on it with the idea of us needing to be tricked or kind of goaded into another stage of development. I think it's, if we take everything that we're saying, what the heck is going on here?
I think it's Gilda's.
Somebody in your house sneezing, Gilda?
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, if we take everything that we're saying as happening intrapsychically, all happening within the psyche of one person, I think it's really really easy for the ego to be, I really enjoy kind of stepping into my own capacity for being a trickster a little bit sometimes, when I either, I try to do this to other people. I appreciate it when other people do this to me, but I also find it helpful in my own thought and thinking about my own way of being sometimes, to notice, sometimes I can get a little high on my horse, drink my own Kool-Aid a little bit too much. And, an aspect of myself kind of, plays a little trick on me. And I think it's really interesting too, how, that can really be kind of in service to a developmental process.
Yeah, you like to have parties with people who drank a lot of wine, and because something gets triggered, and a part of them comes out that it would never show up under normal conditions. So that's also a bit of a trickster kind of thing, in order to get to deep-seated unconscious material.
Yeah.
I think that for me at least kind of plays to Dionysus a little bit more than Hermes, but I do see what you're saying. I think they both kind of serve that same like dissolving of boundaries to go beyond the boundaries that you've set up for yourself.
But in a group, it becomes kind of like a trickster. Maybe on one or two people, but in a group, then it becomes funny and strange and all of it at the same time. So there's I don't know, a bit of a trickster there that plays out.
Yeah, and there's a really great example of this in one of Plato's dialogues called Protagoras. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Protagoras or Protagoras, but
Protagoras.
Okay, Protagoras. And at some point, Socrates in the story is having this argument with Protagoras, and at some point he's kind of attacking him for being a sophist and launching into these long speeches when he's like really just asking him for a simple answer. And at one point he's like, you're going to have to dumb it down for me more or less if you want me to follow you in this argument. Like take pity on poor little Socrates. I can't remember what you say at the beginning of a 5-minute speech if you talk for 5 minutes. And I was just like, that is the best example I think I've ever heard of someone just really getting into that kind of trickster thing and being like, just dumb it down for me. I'm a fool, please. And everyone laughs because they're like, we all know Socrates has got this one in the bag, but he's asking you to come play on his level.
Yeah.
Or at the level of the rest of the audience.
Yeah, I think in the dialogue, the acumen of the attendees is pretty high, but yeah, appealing to the common man, certainly.
Yeah. Do you feel that you've accomplished your purpose tonight, Raquel?
I think I accomplished much more than my purpose.
Okay, good. And,
Yeah.
And Nick, did you're happy with tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very well
Okay.
done, Raquel. Thank you.
Yeah, so I need to ask for some help here. I got contact lenses today, very new kind that's you throw away after one wearing, and it's, you don't have to put it in solution or any other such thing, but you do have to get it out. And for the last hour, I've been struggling with that. I did get the right one out this time, but I didn't get the left one out. So anybody got any gouge about how to get a contact lens out? Because I have to accomplish that before I can sleep.
I haven't a clue.
I haven't a clue, actually.
Okay.
Gilda, your audio is out, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
You pinch it and put it, you go like this.
Okay.
On the eyeball?
Yeah.
Where the lens is, at the lens,
Yeah.
you go like
Yeah.
right, it's soft, it's gel, isn't it? It's different
Well,
if it's glass, but if it's
Well,
gel,
it's not glass and it's not plastic. Well,
is it
yeah,
hard?
it's not. No, it's not plastic. I mean, it is plastic, but it might be gel.
Okay, so if you
Um,
can, if it's able to
Squeeze a
move
little
like
bit.
jelly, then you put your two thumbs in it like this, and you pinch it and pull it.
Okay, well, I'll give that. I'll work on that. I've been trying
So
to
you
do
don't
that.
really touch your eye or anything. You're touching the actual lens since you're throwing it out anyhow.
Yeah, I understand.
So you don't damage. You're not, and you're not actually even touching any other area. So
Yeah.
that's good. You don't get infections or anything.
Well, this afternoon, I'm encouraged because this afternoon I was having problems, and I sat there in front of the woman who has become a friend in that Oculus shop because I've been using them for like 25 years. And I got the left eye out quickly, maybe in 7 or 8 minutes, but the right, I worked on it for about 45 minutes.
Wow.
Finally I got it. So
Oh.
I very assuredly put them back in so that I could see what it was like to see the computer screen. And so I have my distance eye out, and that's not good, but my close-up eye, I'm fine. I can see it fine. So
Well, my mother had them put in the same exact thing. One does this and the other one does the opposite. She had them put in her permanently inside her eye.
oh wow.
And she said it was quick and she's in and out. She's a tough cookie for that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And she was in and out in no time with a pair of glasses, and in 2 days it's so you don't need to put something in and out.
Oh, well, that's when you're having cataract surgery or something like that.
Oh, she did it for her vision. So
Yeah. You do it for your vision, but they're actually replacing your lens for you.
Skip, maybe if you have some eye drops, perhaps you could kind of flood your eye.
Yeah, I'm thinking something like that. But
Maybe.
anyway, so Blake asked me, what's my condition? Well, I'm still here. I bought contact lenses today for the first time in probably 15 years, which means that I'm trying to be more attractive to the girls, I guess. No, actually, it means I'm preparing for my part in the play next summer, which is, since I'm playing Jung, I'm going to have to grow mustache, and he didn't. I never saw him wearing glasses, so I had to get contacts so I could wear them.
Oh, you never saw him wear glasses? I think I have pictures of him with glasses.
Yeah, I may have. I just haven't gone back to it yet. But anyway, I have to get back to the removal operation. If we're here next week, I've succeeded.
Yeah, well, again, thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
especially
Thank-
Raquel.
Thanks.
Great
Thanks,
job
everyone.
tonight. Just a
Yeah.
great presentation. And thank you to everybody on YouTube for watching. If you will, please check back in with us next week. I believe Gilda is going to give a presentation then. So we'll all be looking
Perfect.
forward to that.
Yeah.
Wow,
Give it a
Nick,
try.
you're doing great here. You still have 16 people on YouTube.
Oh, great.
And
Yeah.
that's a very high watermark for Monday night sessions. So
Sweet.
and of course we have many of the regulars here, like Just In Case and Tammy and Daniel, I guess.
Hi, Tammy.
But very often, as you know, a lot of people just check on and then leave within 30 seconds. So the fact that now you have 17. So wonderful job of attracting and keeping people online.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm certainly not doing it alone.
Yeah. And so a wonderful job you did too, Raquel. So show us your kitty cat because
Yeah.
I think a kitty
yeah,
cat.
he wants to appear, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
at this point, the cat's a
Beauty.
star as well.
Yeah.
Look at that. He's ready to bite that fool
Yeah.
from the
He's
back.
gonna bite my face later.
Yeah.
Or my
Regular
books.
feature on the panel.
He takes his revenge on my books, actually.
Well, that's the only way I can enjoy cats is if they're in Brazil and I'm in Annapolis. So,
Is that Om?
what do you mean?
Is it Om? His name?
No, his name is Tim Lops. He has a full name. All my cats, all of my animals have full names. It's just
It's the black one that's named Om.
no. His name is actually Henri Postel.
Oh,
It's a Haitian name. Yeah.
Terrific. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much
right.
for
Have a good
being
night.
here tonight, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Good night, everybody.
night.
Take
Good night,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Bye.
Have a lovely